It's Ludwig Siegele. I'm the European business editor of The Economist, and I used to be the US technology editor. That's why I'm here. I actually still live here, strangely. So you may wonder why we're doing another panel on hybrid work, because we just had a very excellent one. So we actually had two excellent ones. These were more like macro, top-down view of hybrid work and of how to organize this. This is more about the tools, the problems, hands-on, so the micro view. So why don't you start with presenting yourself, introducing yourself?
Great. I'm Jamie Lyon. I'm the VP of Strategy and Business Development at Lucid. And Lucid is a visual collaboration platform that delivers intelligent diagramming and virtual whiteboarding. So we help teams see and build the future and really support them, especially in kind of this new way of working that we've seen over the past few years. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, but I shouldn't say originally, I was in the Bay Area a few years ago, so it's really fun to be back and kind of feel some of that sunshine. So it's a treat to be here. And I also, we have experienced a lot of pain and learning in the process of going remote and now hybrid, but I also have the benefit of talking to customers every single day. So I get to hear about what their definition of hybrid actually is and what they're struggling with, what they're looking to solve, and how potentially they're bringing solutions, bringing change management, and bringing culture changes together in order to address those pains. So I'm happy to share some of those with you today.
And I'm Emily Schunier, and I head up the digital workplace team at Coca-Cola. And so we are focused on Coca-Cola employees. So I also do a lot of listening all day, every day, trying to really understand the friction points, right, with the collaboration tools and the ways that people need to work. So really, how are these tools supporting people getting work done? Our sort of dream and vision is that people don't notice the tools at all. They're just doing their work, and the tools are there to support them and help them do a great job at work. So my team, we own our collaboration stack. So we talk about it as we own the tools that people need to do their work every day, day in, day out, regardless of their function. So some of the niche marketing or finance tools, we help think through the experience and how that all knits together with the other digital collaboration tools, but we directly own and manage the collaboration tools. We're a Microsoft shop, so we have the whole Microsoft stack. And then all of the sort of niche things that, again, we try to integrate really nicely in with that stack. So, again, people aren't seeing the edges and the connection points, but that are just experiencing that their problems are solved and their needs are met.
So is this part of IT, or how do I have to think about that?
Well,
or is this a separate kind of...
around.
Yeah.
So right now we are organized in the technology group, yes, and I think that's good. I think it's a really good spot for us to be, and I think it's helped us to have the experience conversation with the technology teams, and again, help the technology team get very, very focused on meeting the business need rather than solving the technology problem. So.
This is a trend that we've seen a lot, actually, amongst our customers.
Such a role.
Yeah, exactly. There's a kind of collaboration unit that's a really important thought leader for the organization, and I think the pandemic accelerated a trend that was already happening. But
Cool. So I said this is going to be more micro, but let me start with a macro question, just to set the stage. So in both of your companies, how do you organize remote work, both kind of institutionally and personally? I think you said, or you wrote to me, you hate remote work, but that probably doesn't mean that at Coca-Cola there's no remote work.
No, well, I'm not in charge. And even if I was, I would not demand that everyone come to the office every day. We were talking over lunch, Jamie and I, and I was just sharing that we both had young kids during the pandemic, and we talk about being a little bit traumatized by those days. So I appreciate the separation. I appreciate having my workspace separate from my home space. But I realize I'm sort of holding down one end of that continuum, and that a lot of people are really finding a completely, unimagined, unhoped for level of well-being by having more flexibility and being able to spend less time in the car and more time really focused on the things that matter most, whether those be my work things or my home things, or my work things and my out of work things. So the way we have organized it is essentially experimental. So we're looking at trying things, almost thinking about it in an agile way, so thinking about sort of experimentation sprints and learning what we can from that and feeding that back in. And not only linear sprints for teams, but different pods of people are trying different things and figuring out what works in that. And, you know, for my purposes, for my team's purposes, how are the platforms most supportive in some of these different models? If we want to try it this way, how do the platforms need to support us? If we want to sort of organize this way, how do the platforms support us? So I think from a top-down perspective, the thinking is we don't know enough yet to set a policy. We still need to learn. And we all need to settle into this new space and really figure it out. So.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of a different maybe story and background. Lucid traditionally was an in-person experience. Pandemic happened, and we obviously all went remote. For a while, we thought we were going to have required hybrid days in the office, and we did set a policy. There was maybe some pushback to that policy. This is not my area of expertise, but we ultimately decided that being remote and allowing people to come into the office if they wanted to was the best way to do it. I think the themes that were covered in the panel earlier hit on a lot of these topics in terms of the pros and cons. One thing that I do think was important from our perspective, we are headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah, and from a talent perspective, actually the ability to go remote was huge because we got to tap into additional talent pools. So, but when you do that, obviously it makes it harder to then say we need to have a requirement to come into the office. So I think like the talent side of it is also an important consideration, especially for companies that might not be headquartered in the Bay. So when we decided to go remote, it didn't really change most people's patterns of work. They essentially, the people that still wanted to go in, went in. The people that wanted to stay home, stayed home. I personally have 2 young kids, and while I do have some PTSD about trying to work with young kids in the house, I still prefer working remotely. It's easier for pickup and drop off, and it's something that really has helped my life a lot, honestly, in terms of cutting out that commute. So I really appreciate it. But I think the bottom line is that regardless of what your organization either has from a policy perspective or what you personally choose to do, the majority of your meetings are going to be hybrid. And even if it's an in-person office day that your company has, one person's going to be sick and they're going to be out, and you're essentially going to have a hybrid meeting. So I think one of the things that my team has been trying to think about, and as a person I've been trying to think about, is how do you actually make that experience one that's palatable for everybody? Because it's really hard when you have kind of like the remote ecosystem that is living in the meeting and then the in-person ecosystem. Like there's different modes of communication in each of those. Anyway, we'll get to it. But
yeah, that's a very good segue. So I mean, so we in the last hybrid panel here, we're flowing that type of work is not going to go away. I mean, that's the new normal. So from your experience so far, what are kind of the 3 most important pain points? And not Zoom fatigue, we kind of know about this, but what doesn't work?
You want me to go first? I love talking about pain.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, kind of. So I think the first is, just in a general sense, choosing how to communicate. Like if I have this thing that I need to go solve or this question I need to go answer, how do I actually go get it answered? And before you could kind of say, okay, I'm going to go to this person's desk or I'm going to do it quickly. But now there's the cognitive load of which actually like collaboration mechanism do I use? We were talking about this at lunch. I mean, it's old patterns and also trying to figure out, okay, for the job that I'm trying to solve, what do I use? The second I think is engagement. I think that, and you guys, every one of you in the audience is guilty of this, I guarantee it. When you are on a remote meeting, you multitask like crazy. And I do it all the time. There is downside to that. Like actual people, the amount you listen, you're not accountable like you are in a conference room. And so there is lack of engagement that I think does lead to kind of, I would say, efficiency issues and maybe some slower to get the progress that you need. The last one that I would say is connectedness is the way in which I talk about it, but there's just something different about being in person and kind of having that small talk, having that, that just connection with someone. And there are some ways that you can do it remotely. We can talk about that a little bit, but I think that is one of the challenges that, if you're really going to make hybrid work, you got to think about all 3 of those points and how you try to address them.
Yeah, So one of the things that I really like about the way that our team and our company is approaching this is the test and learn, right? So I think we've been very actively trying to feed, even from one meeting to the next, feed in the learnings and feed in the lessons and feed in what really worked. So one thing that we kind of discovered very early is if you have a meeting where most of the people are there, but some of the people are not, first of all, before I forget this, we also, some of the folks that live, in different countries, right, who were never going to be in the big conference room in Atlanta, taught us very early that we wanted to say if you are attending virtually and not remotely. So something about that word choice was really important to people. They wanted to be seen as being virtual and not remote, because that connotes distance and, not proximity, right? So
I like that.
So virtual. So for our virtual attendees, we appoint now a monitor, right? An in-room monitor that can be monitoring that virtual experience and making sure that people are, know the person to go to. Hey, we can't hear, we're having trouble seeing this, something's not working quite right. So somebody that's in the room is monitoring for that virtual experience and attending to anything that needs to be attended to.
We do the same thing, and it's incredibly powerful just to even have an advocate. I feel like
Yes.
that they just feel represented in the room. There's something
That's
emotional
right.
around it that's really strong.
That's
And so
right.
you do that for
Every meeting that has a conference room for us, like if they're in a conference room, you have a hybrid advocate that's the person.
Oh, I love it, calling it that, the hybrid advocate. I think it's, so, and the other thing we've then tried to do is create communities of people, and we've, again, sort of using the platform, so we try to lean into Yammer for this kind of cross-functional, common need, community of practice kind of thing, have people share the ideas. So what's working? And we actually have also sort of a Uber community, I guess, around the communities of people that lead those kind of meetings, so that we can be sharing these findings, so that it's not top down, it's not policies, it's we're all learning this together, and we're all leaning into how can we help each other create these experiences and solve for some of these problems. So I think just that has been a huge help, and I think something, and probably everyone has had this experience, that during the pandemic, you realized how tough the experience was for the people that were not the ones in the room. Because we've had, virtual attendees in meetings forever, because my team there's folks in Asia and folks in Europe and folks in Latin America. And so for those people, it was a dawning, a recognition of how challenging that is when you're not the person that's in the room. So one thing we're really trying to pull forward is to, maintain that equity, that, definitely a key word from this morning, but maintain that equity as we're moving into this space and not lose the democratization that the squares, the equal size of the squares brought us during pandemic times. So I don't necessarily have a package or a formula for that, but it's sort of the test and learn and share, and everybody builds on each other's best practices. And I think, an example like having a hybrid advocate is in the room, monitoring that experience and making sure that the people are being included on the calls is really important.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the other norm that we have that's related to that, and I think like there is this importance of how do you set norms as a company around the specifics of a meeting to really incentivize the right behavior, is that everyone joins from their laptop, so they actually do have a video. They are one of the squares, yeah. Even though everyone is in a conference room and you have kind of like the two sides. You have the stadium seating or stadium angle, which is the full conference room, and then you have like the individual close-up.
What kind of dynamics do you get then? I mean, do people then really participate through the monitor, or do they kind of ignore that and do it as if it were an in-person meeting?
For us, they participate through their laptop, for the most part, because that's where they don't like looking at their self like sideways on the screen up there, so they look at the laptop. And it really, to me, the ability to see people's faces and reactions is huge, and I think it's pretty important, and we've found a lot of success in it. Sorry, but I think it's just related to that hybrid advocate.
Yeah, having some norms to develop around it, and I think also so recognition that those are going to evolve. We're going to learn. We're going to get better and better at this.
Yes.
What you said about kind of the multitasking, I mean, any suggestions how I'm at fault here too, kind of, after 5 minutes, I'll do something else.
Yeah, we've had a lot, so Lucid has an online or a virtual whiteboarding product, and some of you guys have probably used similar solutions. We have found that actually having like another space where people are actually actively collaborating, so the fact that I can see someone's cursor and someone, the meetings that get a little bit more interactive, you're actually doing brainstorming, you're actually doing, feedback where you leave stickies or leave comments, and then you talk about it in the meeting. Modules and kind of things like that, solution and tools like that, where you actually have kind of a shared space where you're collaborating that is different than the video picture and the voice of what you're saying, is really important. I think it keeps people accountable, but also it generally keeps people more engaged because they do have this Zoom fatigue all day long. So if you have something where you're actually inputting and you have like another space where you're actually getting to play a little bit, it helps increase energy and it helps people really, I think, push forward the conversation in a way that keeps people awake and keeps people engaged.
It seems to me that with many things kind of digital, or as things become digital, is you have to be much more opinionated or explicit in what you want. So almost kind of in the physical world, we knew how to behave, kind of what the physicality of things kind of told us what to do. And here you kind of have to reinvent the rules, or you have to think about what are the rules. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes, I think so, and I like the idea of, we almost need something to occupy, to occupy ourselves. I think we've kind of come at that a couple of different ways. The first thing I would offer is that we've leaned into this idea of focus time. So in the Microsoft stack, that you can have it schedule focus time for you. So go out 2 weeks in your calendar and grab blocks of time that are for you, they're meeting free, and and we talk about how to really use that. So often I'll go in and assign a focus time block that has been auto-generated for me to a specific task, a heads down, hard thinking task that I need to do independently. But in the course of having a conversation about the importance of focus time, you're emphasizing, because when you're in a meeting, you need to be focused on that. You can't constantly be multitasking. So as we're trying to make space for people to have enough time to do their work, to get their job done, the other thing is reducing the number of synchronous meetings and being really intentional about having meetings that are important and useful, that you've got a good agenda and a pre-read for. So making the quality, to raising the level of quality, the floor of quality of meetings, I think is another way to make sure that people are going to get engaged. Another thing that we've done that's really, I think, really been impactful, and a little bit surprising how impactful it was, is start showing leaders the data about multitasking during meetings and how their particular group is doing with that, because Microsoft knows if you're sending emails and chats during a meeting that are outside of the meeting chat, right? So you can start to see, and we've looked at it by segment, and it's the leadership level that is the absolute worst about multitasking during meetings. So if this is data that you can show to people, and I think we know, intellectually, we know that we want people focused in those conversations. If you're putting a meeting together, you've done the hard work about, looking through your agenda and making sure that the meetings are important and there's good agendas and the right people are there. And those are some expensive meetings often. So you know that, and then if you can show people, and yet we're not honoring this decision that we've made as a company to spend time in this way, that has been really impactful and really helpful for people to sort of rethink how they're showing up there.
Cool. Thanks for that. Now let's talk a bit about tools and to what extent digital tools can help us with those pain points. Perhaps, tell me in your company what kind of are the must-use tools, and what are kind of more the ones that surprised you that are being used?
Well, we are very actively trying to pivot away from email and really using the channel functionality within Teams, which is similar to Slack and similar to a lot of the other ones, but threaded conversations and collaborating in documents. The fact that there can be, during a meeting, a whole chat that's associated with the meeting is similar, I think, to having a collaboration space, in that, you can like or send a heart or applaud what somebody's saying, or even make a comment without having to interrupt the flow of the conversation, but to make a comment, to ask a question. So I think that's a channels to do asynchronous communication and to have conversations and to bring different people into conversations, to ask people to help co-collaborate on documents, co-create ideas. That's a must-use for us. And then, like I said, the synchronous functionality within Teams, those are must-use things. Regionally, there are other tools that people use. WeChat in China, I don't know if anyone has, folks in China, but my understanding is that it's so embedded into daily life that it's very hard to get particularly customers, right? We might get all our Coca-Cola folks working in Teams, but you can't really get your customers pulled over there because it's so ingrained. So we're trying to look at ways that, we want to make it easier, not harder, right? So we're trying to look at ways that we can bring some of the same business benefits, sort of tool agnostically, right? We've made some decisions about what tools to use, but we really do need to meet people where they are and help them solve the problems that they have. So I think those are kind of the big ones for us now. Those are sort of table stakes. We really do want to lean into Yammer more as this, way to let ideas travel quickly, to bring together groups of people that have common interests, common problems, common interests, inside work and outside work. To build bridges and build communities and again, help those ideas travel more quickly. So like I was talking before, we have a community of people who do meeting and event planning and getting them together to talk about what worked well at our last, LATAM CFO conversation. And maybe they can use that, the Africa team can pick up something that they just did because they've got an event coming up in a couple of weeks. But so we're really trying to lean in and use Yammer for that and get some of these communities going. We are doing a lot now around knowledge sharing, knowledge exchange, knowledge management, and again, sort of leaning into the Microsoft stack and then pulling in some other things to kind of help with some of the AI components and some of the automation and tagging and organization of content. So those are some of the key tools that we're using.
Two that I would add. One is asynchronous video. So we've actually had a fair amount of customers, and also we're experiencing it internally as a company. If you can actually get the message in an asynchronous video and send it in order to cancel a meeting, that is a really powerful mechanism, and we've been able to do it internally, and we've heard from our customers this is huge, especially when we have different people in different time zones, and scheduling is a total nightmare to actually get these people in the same room at the same time. So asynchronous video has been one that has been kind of, I think, surprisingly impactful. And then the second I would say is, this is my space of work, but diagramming in terms of, or just a visual nature, because if there are different languages, different time zones, et cetera, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and it's actually a faster way to get to the same page, get on the same page, literally, about a given topic or, decision or area of alignment. So I think that people are really pushing the envelope. They're taking, video is something that we had before, obviously, but the addition of async video is kind of pushing it to this next new level of collaboration that's really, really interesting and fun.
What are examples for these kind of asynchronous video tools? Kind of, what do you use and how do you use it? Kind of walk me through how a meeting works with those tools.
Well, so from an asynchronous video perspective, it's like almost 100% outside of meetings, right? So one option is actually recording a meeting and then people can see it, but that's a different issue. But a lot of times our leadership will record motivational videos or thoughts. We have a fair number of our C-suite they do Friday thoughts, and it's just 5 minutes video, like what they've seen that week, what's exciting to them, what they're focused on the coming week, and it's incredibly powerful for people. They love it. So not obviously the full scope of an all hands, but allows a leader to do something really targeted. The second would be if there's like a complex document or something that's technical in nature, whereas if you were in the office, you would just go, hey, Emily, can I show you this really fast, just explain to you what it is? Because you need a little bit of a walkthrough. An async video is perfect for that. You can actually you can screen share and you can do whatever you need to on screen, and then obviously put the voiceover on top of it. So that's been really powerful as well. Just a quick explaining use case that otherwise would have taken a 15-minute meeting to schedule on Zoom or schedule on Teams, which would have been a pain to do. And then the last one I would say is, from a virtual whiteboard perspective, I mean, we use these for everything, and we see that our customers end up using them for everything as well. The best example that I love is we have a team space that it's basically just a whiteboard that we use for our recurring team meeting every week. And everyone put pictures in the board, and it's been interesting, pictures of their dogs or their kids or whatever it is, and everyone loves it. And I kind of tried to unpack, why do people love that so much? And I think it's similar to being in the office and you have pictures at someone's desk. You walk by and you go, oh, who's that, right? We don't have an opportunity to do that in the hybrid context. So if you have kind of it's not a real office, but a virtual office or a virtual space where you can share some of that to drive some of that connectedness, it's been surprisingly impactful for our teams.
So one tool, of course, that came up on the other panel is Metaverse. I mean, do you think that has a future? I mean,
Emily and I were just so I have to say, I really believe that humans like working with humans. And there's something really powerful. I think that's part of the reason that we are in this world of hybrid, is because we want to get back together and we want to work in person. We're at a conference together, like this is new and exciting and fun. But there's something about that human interaction that's important. So to me, if the human interaction, I can really feel like I am getting that through the metaverse, maybe. But I still have a desire to talk to someone's face rather than an avatar at this stage. So I think like there are some things that will need to be figured out to really make it feel human if it's going to get widely adopted.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think for me, it's really, the use cases aren't completely clear yet. I'm sure it will have a place. It's really cool. And I'm sure that it will have a place. We haven't quite landed that yet. And I think we're still working on some of the other capabilities and some of the other collaboration habits and sort of new, as we like to call it, modern ways of working. So really leaning into concepts like working out loud and asynchronous meetings and really getting good at some of those behaviors. I think that's first for us is in terms of priorities and what we're going after. Meanwhile, as people are wanting to lean in and experiment with some of these tools, great, because it's that test and learn idea. We'd like to see it really provide value. And it's not to say that it's not valuable to have some cool factor. I mean, that can be fun, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So I feel like we're just not quite there yet to adopt it as a big piece of the puzzle for how we really want to get work done. But I'm open.
One other aspect of collaboration online always intrigued me is it opens up new ways to take decisions. I mean, now a company is no democracy. But have you seen that kind of tools that help you come to a conclusion, kind of speed up meetings or make them more efficient?
Well, I mean, I was on a meeting just this morning talking about how to use some of the new low-code tools to pull up another thread from earlier today to speed up decision making in terms of simple decisions like approvals. Right? So I think one of the things is that used to take a while is a document gets sent to an executive. The executive has to make a decision. They have to, a good example is getting the content ready for the board of directors meeting. This is a task that can take a long time, right? And need a lot of people to weigh in and say, yes, I've seen it and I'm good with that. I'm good for that to go in front of the board. So just streamlining and automating some of that with some of these simple tools, I think can really help. And looking for spots in your workflow that you could speed up, automate. The approval just to some extent puts the decision in a little bit of a box almost and clarify, this is a decision I need you to make. I need you to look at this and say that you approve, or I need you to weigh in on this and add some comments, right? And if you can automate that, I mean, it takes some of that cognitive load off of the decision. I don't have to decide what to do. All I have to do is read the directions and fill in the box and check it and send it off. So I think, I don't know if that totally gets to your question, but that's something we're seeing more and more, people wanting to sort of play with some of these patterns and to figure out how can I streamline, how can I automate, how can I reduce some of the decision fatigue by making things a little bit more simple and straightforward.
Well, I mean, you're talking in more of a macro sense. In a micro sense, in individual meetings, we found that like a simple dot voting or stack ranking, which is kind of hard and cumbersome to do in person, can actually be really powerful in the remote context. And then once you have that data that then persists after the meeting that you can then use. So I think there are some ways in which actually hybrid meetings can even be better from a decision-making perspective. One, because you get more voices potentially out there. You have to facilitate that. You have to make sure there's a mechanism by which they can do that, either it be a whiteboard or a Google Doc or something that actually can get their voice on if they are an introvert, they are a little bit quieter. And then you also have some software that actually helps you then drive towards a decision or drive towards more clear data from kind of a maybe messy conversation that you then kind of force towards alignment. So I think that this is actually an area where hybrid and or kind of software remote meetings are going to help decision making and drive it forward a little faster.
Great, thanks. I think we have some questions on Slido.
Let me turn the mic on as I step past the speaker. I'm going to sit up here with you guys.
Welcome.
As opposed to stand next to you. What a fascinating conversation. Sort of tied to what you were saying, Jamie, someone was asking, what strategies have you found to encourage spontaneous collaboration and brainstorming for hybrid meetings, the kind that happens in-person meetings?
Yeah.
So you mentioned the whiteboardings, so people aren't buying stuff on Amazon or texting their kids or whatever.
Exactly. So one, open up a whiteboarding session, set a timer, and do some sort of icebreaker to get the juices flowing. It's incredible how important and how impactful it can be if you get someone to just open up a little bit. What's your favorite kind of ice cream? And to do something like that and get them going. Another one that we love is having them freehand draw what they did over the weekend. I mean, it's hilarious because people are not very good drawers, but also you get to talk a little bit about what you did over the weekend, and it's fun. So set the space. You can set a creative space, set a timer, and encourage people to basically say, this is a safe space, ready, set, go, and we'll go to reality after we're done with that brainstorm.
Then you segue into, say, product design or strategy development or like real world.
Yeah, totally, because I think you absolutely can. Like our software integrates directly with a lot of the work management platforms that you might need to actually drive towards that next step of action. So the beautiful thing about some of these solutions today is you can do a brainstorm and then you can immediately just right click and say create a Jira issue or convert to a Smartsheet card, and that will integrate with your system. So everyone's been that person in the meeting that has to like transcribe the sticky notes and be the one that actually inputs the data. This makes it so that person doesn't have to do that, and it's a beautiful extension of the meeting.
Cool. Here's another question. Again, talking hybrid work, right? So an issue in a virtual context is reading the temperature of the room, which I used to get by watching colleagues' reactions. How do you replicate virtually? Coca-Cola, how do you, is there a way to, you suddenly have tools to measure interaction, which is fantastic, right? Who's involved, who's actually not paying attention, who's chatting. Can you translate that into temperature?
It exactly that way. The privacy people would not want us to look individually at folks in the meeting. But I mean, I think in terms of taking the temperature, I'm not coming up with a technology way to do that.
There are, so I'm blanking on the names of them right now, but there are a few companies who are actually, they overlay on your video conferencing platform, and they'll show who is talking a lot during the meeting. So you have a dashboard to basically, then as the facilitator, to be able to say, oh, Emily hasn't said much. Go ask Emily her questions, so that it actually like tracks the volume of speech, so you don't have to cognitively do it. So there may be some things like that, but
right, yeah. I guess I was going to say I think we've all kind of gone through a period of adjustment, and we know our own teams too, right? So to some extent, I feel like we're learning how to pick up on those cues, even if we are in a video conference as opposed to in the room. There's not quite as much body language to read, but I think there's still the ability to kind of take the temperature and read the room still, I think. But yeah, I love the idea of having some ways to sort of do real-time sentiment analysis of, how is this going?
Yeah, so those are the main ones. The question about your hybrid advocate. So I think that's a great idea, by the way. Everyone making note of that. We're going to pick your brain on the networking session outside. But how does your network advocate, what do they do if someone's not participating? And is there a broader role? Like, are they encouraging people to engage, or?
Yeah, I mean, the way we've really done it is it's more around, not so much about engagement, but more about barriers to engagement and making sure that we've brought those down. So far, I have not had the hybrid advocate in a role of like, ooh, none of the people are talking. It's more making sure that they could if they wanted, and that they can hear everything, and that they can see everybody, and they can see the presentation. That tended to happen a lot early on when we were first summer of 2021, when we were first putting some meetings together, that the technology was failing us, but nobody in the room could tell because we weren't experiencing it. So we really needed to set up some guardrails to make sure that somebody was going to pay attention and somebody was watching the chat. Help, we can't hear anything. So it really was more about making sure that the technology experience of the hybrid meeting is working, is okay. I think some of the other things are about having some of that more just sort of meeting leadership skill set for hybrid meetings. I think that's more of we have done some work. We've partnered with the HR teams on putting together some resource toolkits to help leaders and to help team members that run meetings, scrum masters, et cetera, help people understand, maybe to look for some of those cues, maybe to think about, who's not been participating. I think some of those things are important in live meetings as well, to make sure that no one person or no set of people are dominating the conversation, that everybody's being heard. I think some of the collaboration tools and visualization tools are also really helpful for getting at that extrovert, introvert, making sure that everybody is able to participate.
Yeah, everyone has stickies that are their own color, so if there's someone missing and the person has put one sticky, you can see it, right. The other thing that we do, so for our hybrid advocate, there is a norm that they will check in with the virtual attendees at times. So they will say, how are my virtual attendees doing? So sometimes that will naturally invite them to participate, even if it's not just technology. Yeah. So you can create a question for your hybrid advocate that is a little bit open-ended like that could encourage participation too.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience here, from the real audience.
IRL, anybody
As
out there
opposed
have
to
a
the
question
unreal
for
audience.
IRL.
Ludwig or
That
Emily or
doesn't seem
Jamie?
to be the case, or I'm kind of blinded here, so I may not see. Okay.
All right. Hi. Yeah. We'll get you a mic.
Thank you. Quickly back to those async videos.
Yeah.
That seems like a very effective push mechanism, like, hey, I want to get some messages out, look at it on your time. What opportunities are there for feedback, particularly on the meetings? It's like, okay, now I know what happened, but what methods are there for participation? Thank you.
That's a good question. I mean, the async video one is a perfect example of it's terrible for feedback because there's not a collaborative space in which you can have a dialogue around it, although we use Slack for the most part, so you can actually have kind of a thread around it. But I think one of the beautiful things about having a cloud-based document that you use to support your meetings is that you do have this extension before and after the meeting in which you can continue to engage. So whether it be a Google Doc or a collaborative Teams document or Teams channel or a document or a Lucid Spark board, like there are lots of ways in which you can actually push people to actually get back into the document from the meeting in order to continue the thread or continue the conversation. I don't know if that answers your question, because I think it is a hard job to solve.
One thing I'll mention, so we have a homegrown tool that does this, but I'm sure there's other things available, but we have a tool called Rate My Meeting. And it is a very simple survey tool that you as a meeting facilitator can add to your meeting, and it gives you it's not super customizable because we built it just to have a sort of apples to apples way for people to look at meetings across a broader organization. And so it gives you a chance to give some feedback, and there's some clear questions. Did the meeting have an agenda? Did it have a pre-read? Were the right number of attendees involved? Some basic questions, but I think it's like three or four questions, and then some opportunity for text, verbatim feedback. But a meeting facilitator can invite Rate My Meeting to that, to their meeting, and then solicit that feedback. And if a group leader wants to mandate that everyone use this, it can be rolled up and aggregated so they can see how over time am I shifting meeting culture in my group.
Great, thank you very much. One last thing, so tell me your funniest hybrid work story. Jamie.
I'm going to get my notes.
I have some embarrassing ones. I think the best is, so I had a 2-year-old at the time when the pandemic hit, and the zoo was closed. All the places were closed, but we had chickens in our neighborhood. So like the one place we would go was to the chickens. And one day I was multitasking, as we did then, and I was on a call, and the CFO of my company said something, and I thought I was on mute. And I basically said, if you behave, you can see the chickens. And it wasn't to my 2-year-old, it was to our entire board of directors. So it wasn't great, but it was very funny. So
I'm sure everyone, those moments of real life
Yeah.
kind of coming in were great. So mine is that I had a first grader, and in the office that I was using, we had the bathroom right behind it, and the door happened to be open. There's another door into it. Of course, my first grader didn't realize that I was on a video call at the moment, and so he, turned, dropped his trousers, and started to use them. And I'm talking, and it took me a minute to recognize what was happening behind me, and why is everyone laughing on this call? So his little butt cheeks are famous at my company now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
amazing.
Well, thanks
Thank
to the
you.
audience.